Hello and welcome to episode 147 on the Everyday Joy podcast. Today we are talking about families. Now, not all relationships look the same, and today we talk about the importance of loving family, but also knowing when the right thing to do is to love them from a distance. Before I get into today's conversation, I want to read a quick message from Rebecca, who's just joined the Facebook group. She posted saying, "Hello, I'm new to the Facebook page. I've been listening to the Everyday Joy podcast since it started in February and I absolutely love it." Well, welcome to the Facebook community. And if you want to be a part of this incredible group that's just filled with really encouraging people who love this podcast and want to grow their faith every day, the link to that is in the description below. Right now, though, let's get into today's conversation with Jackie.
You should be like one big happy family, full of sympathy toward each other, loving one another with tender hearts and humble minds. That's 1 Peter 3:8 from the TLB version of the Bible.
I have got Jackie here in the studio with me. Jackie, that verse basically describes every Bollywood film. One big happy family, singing songs.
Yeah, and we dance really well.
Yes, no rehearsal needed. Yeah, right. Not.
Oh, I love it.
But then obviously in every film, as you peel back the layers, you see the complexities. There's family history there's issues, and a verse like this can seem quite simplistic, I think. It's almost thinking, God, have you met my family?
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to unpack this today because I think all of us can relate to the fact that families and the family dynamic can be complicated at best.
Oh, at its very best.
So Jackie, what are your first impressions of this one?
Well, you can't choose your family. I think that was my first thought was, the implication is that, by saying family, we're saying we don't have the control. Like we don't get to choose who's around us. We have no control over the family we're born into and who else is in that family. Very much like happens when we go to church or work or, even to the supermarket. We don't have that control. And what Peter's telling us is that regardless of our choices or preferences, we're all together. We're all in this as one big happy family. And if we all behave well, we can learn to get along and show some compassion to each other.
Yeah. And you know what? I think it was Michael Jordan says you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
I'm so sure I misquoted that. But it's this idea that if you don't try at all, well, then you're not going to get anything.
Yeah.
And even though family dynamics, and this is my first impression, it can be really hard sometimes. But in the continual trying, you'll get something out of it.
Yeah, if you make an effort, like at the very least you'll learn something. And we talked about that earlier in the week as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. What does this verse tell you about who God is or what matters to him?
That we are his family. He looks at us as family. Yeah, that, where he wants us to love one another. And that doesn't mean, so this is where we go into that, families are complex, there's lots of different people and different perspectives out there. Family doesn't mean that we're always going to get along. It doesn't mean that there's never conflict. It doesn't mean we're going to like every person all the time or even some of the time. And that we need to be, or, almost in God's eyes, we're obligated to be in close relationship or any relationship with everyone. But I think what it does mean is that we treat each other with respect. Yeah, we're like-minded. And the word used in this scripture, this verse, also means harmonious. So not necessarily that we have to all think the same thing at the same time, but we're harmonious in our approach to that. If we are like-minded in our love, if we put relationship over being right, then we can build a healthy, thriving community. And I think, in essence, the passage is telling us to be like Jesus. Jesus was compassionate, and we're called to compassion as well. And that's more than just emotion, and it should be something that drives us to action in building those relationships.
I love that. So many great points there, and I want to touch on that bit that you brought up, Jackie, that we don't need to be in close relationship with everyone, but we can look to the scripture for how we can do that, full of sympathy towards each other. You can be miles apart but still have sympathy for that person. You can still love on them. You can still pray for them. You can still have a tender heart for them.
Absolutely.
Even though you're not communicating. I've got a family member who we don't communicate as much now. There's stuff that's happened. I think about them often.
Yeah.
And it's hard, and it's not appropriate really for me to rebuild and reconnect in this season.
Yeah.
But I say to myself, I can still wish the best for them.
Yeah.
I can still pray for them. I can still do what I can as a family member apart from them. So maybe for you listening, that's kind of your big takeaway nugget. You don't have to rebuild every single bridge all the time. You can love and have sympathy and have kindness from a distance if that's where you're at in that relationship.
Very similar circumstance myself, Joy. I have a close family member that lives overseas, and the relationship is not what it once was, but I actually feel, and I'm quite okay with it not being that way, and I think it's healthy for everybody involved for it not to be that way. And it took me a few years, but I got to the point where I can look at that person with sympathy towards them. I can love them. I can have a tender heart towards them. I can be humble about the part that I played in that relationship breakdown as well, and still love on them and still be kind in my approach.
Yeah. And we do come back to this point a few times. Families are complex.
Very.
And I think we get this idea from, I don't know, magazines and media and all sorts of things that a big, happy family looks like this. This is the formula. This is what it should look like. But it's not the case. And maybe releasing yourself from the expectation of what it's meant to look like.
Yeah.
You don't all have to be living in the same house.
Yeah.
You don't have to be talking to each other every day.
Yeah.
You don't always have to get along all the time. But you can have the heart of Christ towards them. And that's what the focus, I guess, of today's episode is. Do you have a story, Jackie, of how this verse has come alive in your world?
Well, one of the best examples I can actually think of is I encountered a lady that I know through small group at church, and the relationship that she has with her mum, and how well she loved her mum, like almost the very embodiment of this verse, through some really tough times. So they'd always had a fairly difficult relationship, but it was somewhat tempered by the relationships that she had with her father. And her dad died very unexpectedly and very suddenly, and all of a sudden she became the support person for her mum, and in the midst of all her own grief had to support someone who'd been enabled in many areas that had shown through difficult behaviour, shown through some really unpleasant behaviour, and all of a sudden she was forced to learn new ways of operating with this person, even in the midst of her own grief and shock and everything, and her mum, through her own grief, would often sort of, lash out in anger and say mean words, and, didn't necessarily mean them, but the outworking of that grief at that time, came through really unpleasantly. And my friend was just amazing. But she also, it wasn't that I'm going to just lie down and let you treat me like this. I'm going to love you, and I'm going to be kind, and I'm going to show you how to do this well. But actually, I'm not going to put up with this, and I'm not going to put up with that. And if you behave like that, you have to go back to your house, or I will leave your house if I'm visiting you. And she just did it with love. She never yelled at her mum. She never got really upset with her. She just showed her that, no, I'm here, and I will love you, and I will support you, and I will, have sympathy towards you. I'll have a tender heart towards you. But, we're going to get through this together, and I'm not going to just lie down and let you.
What you've touched on, Jackie, I think is something a lot of us can relate to, because the whole parent-child dynamic, it doesn't go away as you age. They will always be your parents, and you will always be seen as their child. And when life changes and external circumstances force you to renegotiate, I suppose, the roles in the relationship, that in-between time is really challenging. And for your friend to stand up and to say, no, I'm not really tolerating that behavior, but also I'm going to treat you with respect and love. That is a really hard thing to do. Make no mistake.
So hard. And, I was the one having the conversations with this lady going, no, you're doing great. It's okay. You can do it. Yes, no, that's awful. Nobody should treat somebody else like that. But you are just amazing.
Yeah.
And she couldn't see it, but she was.
Yeah. So for you, if you are in that space, just know that even though it feels hard, you're doing good. It is a very hard thing to do. Most people just disconnect and they disconnect. Yeah. That's all I'll say.
And you may never get the feedback that you want from that person, but just rest assured that even if it's just me and Joy, we're sitting here cheering you on, telling you you're doing great, keep loving them, keep being kind, and, you are awesome.
There's 3 main application points I want to cover. For those of you who are the peacemakers, you are the ones going above and beyond trying to keep your family together. I want to acknowledge that it is a really hard place to be, and both Jackie and I just are here with you. Well done, you. What a powerful way to be the hands and feet of Jesus. For those of you who might feel guilty about the fact that relationships now look different to the way they did before, we see a great example of this in the story of Joseph. He was betrayed by his brothers. His brothers were toxic. And many, many years later, Joseph encountered his brothers again. Did he immediately try to rebuild the relationship and get back to where they were? No, he tested them. He tested to see if they had changed before he let them back into his household, into his life. And sometimes distance is really healthy. And sometimes you need to have those boundaries in place to protect the ones that you are required to care for. Your children, your spouse, your partner, all of those people God calls you to look after. And sometimes external family members, they can impact your role in caring for those that you actually have a responsibility over. And maybe for you, your application point for today is to be at peace with the fact that you are on the right track, even though it's not your version of a big, happy family. Maybe this is what it looks like in this season. And big hugs to you. It's not an easy space to be in. And the last bit of application is for those of you listening who are on the outer. Maybe as a result of some decisions and choices that you've made, other family members have cut you out. Maybe you've cut yourself out. Maybe you don't have many family members close enough to even have quarrels with. Well, I just want to encourage you today with the fact that no matter what happens with your earthly family members, you are part of God's family. 1 John chapter 3, verses 1-2. See what great love the Father has lavished on us that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are! ! You are a child of God. You have a family. You belong. In fact, there's an amazing song by Hillsong Worship called Who You Say I Am, and it's all about belonging in God's family. The fact that you are His child and there is a place for you. That song always makes me tear up because sometimes I forget that I am part of another family, and this family is something that's eternal. This is a family that will never turn its back on me. This is a family that I belong to always. I hope that encourages you today. And hey, Jackie is going to be back tomorrow and wrapping up the week. I'm really looking forward to it. Also, if you are listening here in Australia and if you are listening on the day an episode drops, every Friday between 12 to 1 on my radio show, I do something called the Everyday Joy Hour, where I open up the phone lines and you can have the opportunity to talk with myself and my co-host, where we unpack exactly like what we do here, a topic or an idea. But what's special doing it on live radio is that you get the opportunity to share your stories as well. So if you want to be a part of that, set a reminder, and more links and more information on that over on the Everyday Joy Facebook group. Hey, catch up again tomorrow.